welcome to episode 2 of Fortean Photography. Today we will be traveling across the pond to discuss a photograph of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. I'm Emily Wayland, designer and photographer for the Singular Fortean Society.
And I'm Tobias Wayland, the Singular Fortean Society's head writer and editor. So, very little in the way of verifiable fact is known about the popular story surrounding the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, other than her name, to whom she was married, and around when she died.
That's correct. So we know that the Brown Lady is Lady Dorothy Walpole, and she was called the Brown Lady because she famously wore a brown dress. And she was married to Charles Townsend, and she was supposedly his second wife. And Charles was known to have a temper. So she supposedly had an affair with Lord Wharton.
Which would have been before she was even married to Lord Townsend,
That's
right?
as far as we know.
Okay.
That would have meant that Lord Wharton was married, which is quite the scandal.
It's scandalous in that time period, no matter what.
It's the 18th century Kardashians, I guess. But, so apparently this angered Charles to the point where he decided to lock her in her room for pretty much the rest of her life, as far as we know.
Okay, so, that's the story, anyway. As far as what we're able to verify, we know that she lived, we know that she was married, and we know she died around 1726. But the popular story then, and this was a conspiracy even in her own day from what I've seen. So the popular version then is that she was essentially kidnapped in her own home by her jealous husband, who found out about an affair she had had before they were even married, and decided to fake her death, even going so far as to throw her a mock funeral before locking her up in their manor house, where she eventually died from neglect or heartbreak or
murder, hanging herself,
right,
all the dramatized versions of what could have happened.
Anything that makes a good story, sure. And at the time, it was said that, at least the official story, I think, according to her husband, who some people suspect to be her killer, was that she had died of smallpox.
Which is likely also for that time period.
A lot of people did.
So there's about 100 years of sightings up until the photograph we're going to talk about was taken. And there's 3 more well-known ones that I'll mention here.
Okay, so what are the 3 most famous?
Well, just before I begin, there's 2 out of the 3 that are more word-of-mouth accounts.
Okay.
And we don't have verifiable sources for them.
So we're talking about folklore.
Exactly.
Which, again, folklore doesn't mean fiction, but it does mean that the stories were spread mostly through word of mouth. It's difficult to verify any sources, and they may have changed over time.
Correct. So in 1835, the lord who was living at the hall at the time was throwing a Christmas party, and 2 of his guests, that we only know their last names, Loftus and Hawkins, so we don't even know their first names, which kind of makes the story seem a little questionable to me. But apparently they were going back to their rooms to stay for the night, and they saw the apparition of a woman coming towards them and recognized her brown dress. So the more credible one is in 1836, the following year. A friend of Charles Dickens actually stayed at the hall, and his name was Captain Frederick Marriott. And he went there to basically debunk it. He wanted to prove that smugglers were causing a ruckus, pretending it was a ghost to keep people away from the hall so they could steal riches or whatever.
Sounds like a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yeah. But anyways, he stayed. He later wrote down his account, but he stayed the night, and he saw an apparition of a woman coming towards him, and instinctively he decided to draw his pistol and shoot at it.
Who wouldn't?
The bullet went through the ghost because
it's a ghost.
And I don't know why shooting at a ghost is a great idea, but he did. And bullet went straight through him. He got so scared he never went back. So about 10 years before the photograph we're going to talk about, the Lady Townsend, who was living there at the time, a later generation, apparently saw this ghost descending the staircase with her son.
Okay.
The main staircase of the hall.
And what makes that particular account interesting is the inclusion of the staircase, right?
Right.
So, in this later story, prior to the photograph, we see the addition of the staircase, which could mean a couple of things. It could mean that the apparition is, for whatever reason, associated with that staircase, and maybe one would expect to see her there. Or it could be a story element that was taken from this account and then used in the narrative of this later photograph.
Right.
Okay.
So this famous photograph, it was taken on September 19th, 1936 by Captain Hubert C. Provand and Indra Shira. And they were hired by Country Life magazine to photograph the hall to feature in the December issue. And so they were photographing the staircase, which was the main fixture of the home, kind of like the crown jewel. And they had already taken the shot, but Shira, who was Provand's assistant, noticed a vapor in the back of the staircase coming towards them. He told Provand to hurry up, take off the lens cap, fire the flash. And as it got closer, it looked more and more like a woman. So they reported seeing it before they took the photograph, as they took the photograph, and had that image was actually published in the issue that year, and was also picked up by Life magazine. And to their deathbeds, they claim that everything that happened was real.
So there's some interesting elements there. Obviously the fact that they stuck to their story is fascinating. There's no
deathbed confessions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, perfect. And then, beyond that, the fact that they talked about seeing this apparition, coalesce in front of their eyes prior to taking a picture of it is really interesting to me. Because I think one thing that, I know I personally look for is anytime somebody says that, they didn't see something in an image with their naked eye prior to taking the image, that usually seems suspect to me. So, again, I find it really interesting that, they talk about seeing this ghost and then, managed to take a picture of it with their 1930s camera, which is something that a lot of people can't seem, to do today with digital cameras and cell phones. So, kudos to those guys.
Right.
Great job. All right. So, now obviously you've analyzed this photograph.
I've looked at it a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's fairly possible that this is an actual paranormal encounter.
Okay, so why don't we start with some of the skeptical explanations.
So let's talk about light leaks to start.
Sure, let's.
So light leaks occur when a lens I'll get this.
Do we have props?
Visual aid. A lens attaches to the body of the camera, and if there's any sort of looseness or any breakage or anything, light would travel in the sides where it's attached.
Okay. So sort of what she's talking about is you have the lens up here, and it's possible if this casing was cracked or something that you would get some light. And this is an old camera. This is from the 30s.
Yep.
Right? Okay. We don't know that this was the camera they were using, but it's similar. And so if any of this was cracked, light could get in through here. But then also on the back here, if there was something some issue with the seal here, then light could potentially get in to affect the film
Right.
directly. So, okay, great. So why don't you think it was a light leak as you break your anti-camera?
I'm gonna just put this down.
Sure.
I don't think it was a light leak because the light would be coming in off the edges where the crack or...
Sure, so it's the light would be coming...
Words are hard.
Right, so the light would be coming in from the edge because that's where the leak occurs.
Exactly.
However, this apparition is dead center.
Dead center.
Okay.
And it also looks a lot like a woman.
Right, and so there are details on the apparition that make you suspect that a light leak would be very unlikely. It would take something of a miracle for a light leak to spontaneously occur that looked exactly like, ethereal image of a female spirit coalescing on a staircase.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough.
So another theory is that they took some like grease and put it on like the lens or a pane of glass in the shape of a woman. Like they drew it on something, put it in front of the camera. So we know that they used a flash. And it would have been much like this one that I happened to detach from my prop.
Sure.
But how the flash worked back then is that these bulbs were single use. They would flash, but then they'd pop off or they'd just be burnt out and you'd have to replace it. And these were very harsh flashes. Like flashes,
they were bright.
They were bright, and you couldn't control how bright they were. You can do that with flashes nowadays. You can kind of control how bright it is.
Sure.
And
but at the time, you would have had this extremely bright, harsh light
shining directly at the subject as it is attached here or to the side. Sometimes they had somebody holding it.
Sure.
And if you put a piece of glass in front of that, glass is very reflective. It's like a mirror. It would basically look blown out. Like it would just be completely white from being overexposed because the glass would just bounce the flash right off.
Interesting. Okay.
And if it was the lens, I think that would be really hard to do because sometimes people take Vaseline as like an RC thing and put it on the edge to make it look foggy. But it's not like the Vaseline is in focus. The scene is very in focus and the figure is very clear. So I think if they would have been focusing on the stairs, the figure would have just looked like a mess, not exact with the detail you would have seen if it was directly on the lens.
Sure.
Because you're not focusing on it.
Right, and that would be similar if it was anything else on the lens. So like, if they had tried to paint on the lens, or even like held a smaller image much closer to the lens, or similarly attached it.
Like think if like a bug flew on the lens.
Though that's blurry.
Yep, exactly. So that's why I don't think that...
It's too sharp.
It's too sharp.
Okay. Great.
And I know it's a vapor, but it's pretty sharp for what it is.
Sure.
And he described it as such.
Fair enough.
So a lot of times with these photographs, a common explanation for a non-credible photograph is double exposure. And that can occur two ways. So how we talked about the film and how you inserted it into the back, it would be a roll. So the film, you'd take a picture and then it would advance to the next one. Occasionally, you would only maybe get the film halfway down and you'd take the next picture and there'd be two pictures on one sheet exposure
you should get that
film.
where people can see it, but yeah.
So yeah, like the film would advance only halfway if you didn't crank it all the way through. So there'd still be some of that old picture there, and then you take the next picture and some of that picture would be on the previous photo.
Sure, but that would be by accident.
That would be by accident.
And it probably wouldn't end up dead center.
Nope.
So I think we can pretty safely assume that regardless of the veracity of the photograph and the narrative attached to it, it wasn't an accidental double exposure.
No.
Because again, that would be the sort of thing that might include the edge of another picture or something sort of not centered into the frame.
And we've got the whole staircase. She's dead center.
Sure.
So a deliberate double exposure can happen in darkroom processing. So when you go to develop your film in the old school way with film, you would put your film in a film carrier and insert them into what is called an enlarger. Here is a photo of an enlarger just so you can see what I'm talking about. And there's a lens on an enlarger, and you'd put the film carrier with the film into a slot just above the lens of the enlarger, and the enlarger shines light through, exposing the image onto photoreactive paper below.
Okay, so a double exposure would literally just be putting 2 layers of film in there so they overlay.
Correct. Or you can expose one image, stop, take that one out, put another one in, and expose it on there too. So there's 2 ways you can do that.
Okay. Well, why do people think that this image might have been a double exposure?
If you're facing the image, to your left, there is a very sharp line.
Are you talking about that really bright line that's just above the banister to the viewer's left when they're looking at the photograph?
Yes.
It's about the same length and width of the banister itself?
Yes.
Okay, so why do people think that's a double exposure?
They think they took one picture of the staircase and then took another one with the ghost and the staircase and overlaid it. So they think that they didn't quite match up the photographs on top of each other.
But if that was the case, why would that be the only element in the photograph that is off-center? I mean, wouldn't there be other artifacts from other things that must have also been off-center?
Yeah, because like you can't just have one part of a double exposure be somewhat overlapped and then have another part of it not be. The stairs would be all off. Everything would just be off.
You would think, like all of it would be off just a little bit, and you would see a lot of that.
Exactly. And the only way that I've seen that ever happen is like, let's say they didn't have their camera on a tripod and they dropped it. You'd have like one part of the stairs and slightly below, but even then everything would be off, not just that section of the stairs. I
think it's pretty safe to assume, considering that this was a professional photo shoot, I mean, they must have been using a tripod, right?
Yes, I would assume that. So especially for that time period, it was to keep your images stable, especially if they were using like large format film that was like 4 by 5 inches or 8 by 10 inches. If that's what it was, then you would really need to keep your camera steady. And as we can tell here, the staircase is really sharp.
Right. So, it seems unlikely that either an accidental or purposeful double exposure could be to blame for this.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then you're probably wondering, well, what's that line?
Yeah, actually, I am wondering what.
Remember how we were just talking about how like flash bounces off of things?
Yes, we were.
So obviously the surface of the wood is very shiny, but we are in a very old, fancy, ornate house. There was probably various fancy, there could have been big windows with stained glass, lots of glass fixtures, probably a mirror in the entryway because this was in the foyer. Lots of reflective
surfaces.
Very shiny place. Right.
Well, I mean, you can even see in the photograph itself how reflective even like the hardwood surfaces are in that image. So you think that the flash reflecting off something might have something to do with that?
Right. And I've actually photographed weddings in places where there's like mirrored walls. And how it'll work. This is visual aid again. So pretend this is a modern flash. I shine my flash at the ceiling. It bounces, and then some of the light hits the mirrored wall and flashes back really sharply. If it's above the banister, then if there's a mirror off to the side there, it's hitting the top of the banister. The top of the banister cuts where that part of that light is hitting, if that makes any sense.
Oh, so it could even be light reflecting off the banister itself, causing that artifact. Okay, well, interesting.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me than the double exposure, because it certainly explains why that would exist over just the one banister and nothing else.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough. Interesting.
Right. So like that flash, that perfect line, either reflects right off that, or it's like hitting a mirror off the side, and the top of the banister. I mean, the light's not going any further down than that point because that banister is cutting that light off.
Sure. Okay, I
just
see.
wanted to explain that part.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, great. Are there any other skeptical explanations?
That about explains it with that one. And like we said, Provand and Shira, to their deaths, were just like, this happened.
Okay, so
I choose to believe them.
Okay, so yeah, fair enough. So in your professional opinion, this photograph can't be explained by any mundane means that you're familiar with.
No, and I think we can keep trying, and if somebody figures it out, cool. But I mean, this is an old picture, and it's never been proven. So I think
it's never been disproven.
It's never been disproven.
Okay, interesting. So at this point, I don't think that we should be looking at this photograph as, you know, something that we're just waiting to prove is a hoax. I think at this point we have to be looking at this photograph and sort of saying, well, according to our best analysis, this photograph seems to be legitimate, and what the heck does that mean?
We don't know. I mean, we don't even know if like this was the brown lady. Like, people are taking that narrative and applying it to this apparition. It could be a different lady. It couldn't even be a lady. We don't know what ghosts are.
Right, of course. So, but I guess my real ultimate point there was, it's great to try to debunk things. Certainly we try to debunk things, as our first step. But at a certain point, you're doing more harm than good, and you're sort of being disingenuous intellectually when you're just waiting for something to come out as a hoax when by all appearances it's a solid piece of evidence, which the brown lady of Raynham Hall photograph appears to be. So wow, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's one of my favorite photographs to look at, and we'd love to hear what you think of this photograph. Let us know down in the comments. Do you see anything we haven't seen already? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's what do you think about this photograph? We'd love to know. And we'll see you the next episode, but you can always find us at singularfortean.com. We're all over social media.
All of the social media.
All of it. And I put our links for our social channels in the description below. And we also have a Patreon.
Please do consider joining the Singular Fortean Society. It's something that obviously we believe in, and if you believe in it too, then we would love to have you. So, thanks.
And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, because we will do one of these every month along with other awesome paranormal videos. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.